Okay, I think the most important question to ask yourself in lots of creative endeavours, but particularly with podcasting, is why. So, Gags, why did you start a podcast?
Why? Yes. I have to go back a few years prior to it starting. My co-host, P-Man, and we became good mates through a tough period of my life. I think this is a safe space to open up, right?
This is the safest
That's what my
space,
podcast
right?
is about. I went through a tough period of my life. I'm a creative person by nature, and I'm very curious. And I was questioning things in my life where I wanted to go and what journeys I should take. And Pete came, in a way, as a good mate, but came to the rescue in terms of helping me out. And on that journey, we became really close mates. And I helped support his business while he helped plug me in certain ways. And yeah, we found this cool cellar underneath his cafe, and we said one day that's a great place for a podcast. We should do a podcast. And it just sparked from there. And it didn't really make sense to a few years later, COVID, all that stuff that happens in between, that we really found our why. And it was to find those true stories that when you're stuck in a moment or in a rut or you're pivoting in life, a humbling experience might come along. And how you get out of that, be it, a tribulation to a triumph, and, how you learn from that. And that's what got me through my period. So really, I was just creating a therapy session for myself off the back of other people's stories. I think that's my why. That was the reason why I started, yeah.
And did you end up using the cellar?
We never did in the end.
Oh, well.
Honestly, it sounds like a terrible audio space.
Thank you.
Sounds very bouncy.
We tried it once and we were like, no, we're out of here. We got help with audio, which I can talk about later, but we didn't go there.
Okay, so there's currently about 4.2 million total podcasts registered around the world. Currently on Apple Podcasts, which is the world's biggest listening platform, there are about 2.7 million podcasts, but only 460,000 of those are active, which means they've released an episode within the last 90 days. So to me, that seems like an excellent cut through in comparison to something like social media. So Katie, why, from a business perspective or a marketing perspective, should people consider starting podcasting?
So look, a lot of podcasts are driven from, I guess, more of a content point of view, and that makes sense. Like, definitely don't start a podcast as a business just to talk about your business. No one will listen. No one wants to be sold to, right? So I think if you're looking, there's a few different ways to go about it, but it really is about, I think, from a commercial perspective, creating a community, an engaged community, and building trust within that community, and with those people having, as you said, like, it's really about building that vulnerability. And I think it's such an intimate media podcast, and maybe I'll go on to talk about that later, but it's definitely a space where you can create that connection and trust with your customers. So what I would recommend if you were starting a podcast from a business perspective, is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yes.
Then I would recommend trying to be a little bit insight-led and think about who's my audience and what's something that's going to connect with that audience that somewhat relates to me, and then find a topic there or a theme, and it can be a niche theme. I think niche is good to start with, and connect with people. And then you can weave in the advertising later.
How do you recommend people pick a topic? I mean, obviously yours was quite niche, but how do you recommend people would go about picking a topic?
It all depends on your premise, your style of podcasting. For us, Pete and I, it was quite easy. We lent in at the beginning about our stories, and we wanted to make sure that we had an open space to hear other people's stories. And they could range, they could be about successes and, the stories that led them to there, or, how they got knocked back. We spoke to a young girl through her story about surviving a car crash and the rehabilitation of that, and a young girl who had stomach cancer, to a sports player who, you know, from AFL to an entrepreneur. So there wasn't one particular topic that we were targeting, but we wanted to make sure that there was a line in the sand through the episode that you could take as a consumer or listener, you could take something from that. Again, I was making the whole podcasting episodes about how I could learn from this, because again, it was so rewarding at the same time as hearing people's stories, because I love storytelling. It's what I do for a profession and a living, but also, you know, as now a podcast side hustle. It was to make sure that there was a point in the topic that someone could get from it. So they were basically general, but we made sure that we knew before we got the episodes recorded and they came into the booth, we kind of had an understanding of how it would kind of go. We had a bit of a backstory. So yeah.
Yeah, how are you sourcing those? Like, how are you sourcing people? You know, obviously you want to pick a topic.
Yep.
You want pick people that go with your topic.
Yeah.
So you need to have, you know, a strong story with them.
Yeah.
How are you finding people with strong stories and then getting them on the podcast? I'm asking this from a personal perspective too.
Yeah, I know, right? We did a lot of sliding in DMs, asking questions.
Familiar with that.
I think you see a lot of people's and hear a lot of people's story on their social, you know, page and their content and what they give to you as a viewer, as a consumer. But what I've learned, you know, in advertising especially, it's kind of surface level most of the time. Yes, people go deep and they will expose their other stories if they want to, but you only get a snippet of it. And we wanted to make sure Humble the series was an experience that you could go really deep. And that would kind of let us to that person would be good. Pete has some people in mind already. I had some people in mind already. We're not a few seasons in. We're still novices to a certain degree. We've had a lot of help with people.
I think that's one of the keys as well. Everyone has a humbling story. Everyone has one of those stories, and it's about making people comfortable enough to come to you and tell you those. But I feel like anyone in a room could tell you an incredible story along those
100%.
lines.
You do it every day with a friend over coffee. You lean in, you go, so tell me about that. And that's how it starts. And really, that's what we do in the booth. We're chatting beforehand. We know where they're going to go. We have to sometimes poke them to get there, and you might hear that in the episodes. And some are just happy to just go and just open up.
My thing though with people is if you've got an idea, do not overcook it. Get behind the microphone and just start talking. People don't care that you don't have a polished idea to start with. It's a journey and people love being on that journey with you. I think we've passed that point of people expecting things to be polished and perfect to be ingested. They actually like the rawness of it and growing with you. So yeah, don't overcook the content and, is anybody going to listen? People are going to listen. It might not be how many people you want to start with, but it will grow over time like everything does. So.
Yeah, I know the first podcast that I was listening to, this is a few years back, the girl was definitely just recording it on her iPhone.
We were stumbling through it. We were learning, just Googling, watching vlogs of how to get the audio levels right, and I have some understanding of that because I work in an industry where we're filming, we're recording, you know how to ask the questions, you know where to hold the mic, or, move it away and make it sound and then come back. You learn those things, but we had first episode, second episode, we were hopping around. We went to Pete's house for one of them, and the dog was barking in the background. We're like, fuck, this is not going to work. This is not the venue. And then we went to another place, but yeah, it's part of the process.
And the content will come. I think as well, the more you get comfortable with it, the first one's probably a bit scripted, and the second one's probably a little less scripted, and then it becomes a conversation, which a podcast should be.
So my format, I go to a restaurant. That was what I really wanted to do, to try and keep it casual with chefs and that sort of thing, keep it in the hospitality industry. And I took it out of the studio where you can control everything and you can make sure the sound is perfect. And I added as many sounds and as much difficulty into that podcast as physically possible, and then gave it to you and said, fix it, please.
Well, like that kind of thing is fine. It's the that you just
This is how Bespoke Podcast started with Mamma Mia. So we looked at their audience. They wanted to reach parents, and what they really wanted to do was build that trust with those parents and build a community. And so we said, okay, when I say we look at insights, what that really means is looking at stats around, what connects parents to a car with their kids. So we kind of thought along the lines of, okay, well, let's come up with a co-listening podcast where what we discovered is sometimes that drive in the car is an opportunity for parents to connect with their kids, and maybe the only one they get all day, like on that drive home from school. So it's a great opportunity to create a co-listening podcast and a topic that they're both going to enjoy. Generally, with a Bespoke podcast, it will be eight episodes, and then with that, their advertising is tied into it. Having said all of this, a Bespoke podcast will start from $250K. So it's a big deal. But with that, what really benefits, the benefit of working with Mamma Mia is we go, okay, new podcast. Every one of our 58 podcasts will we'll basically cross-promote to this new podcast, and we'll get 10,000 listeners in one day. I will say, do overthink the subject headers of every single episode.
Yes. That was something that I was going to discuss with you guys later, but we can do that now. SEO. This is creative industries. SEO of podcasts. What are we working into that? Titles, podcast descriptions. Anybody?
Tags that go back, URL, whatever's.
Yeah.
We do the same. Most people do it, but we try to create a bit of tension in the episode title that makes people lean in, gives them a summary of that person that they might be listening about. And we do tags and hashtags and all the other, notes in the episode. Yeah.
I would say the biggest thing would be a soundproof room. Microphones. Obviously, there's different tiers and how you use them and the audio processing afterwards. But you can 100% tell if someone's sitting in their kitchen and their voice is bouncing off all of the walls compared to someone that's in a smaller room. Even if, you don't have the budget for a studio, or, that your kitchen's tiles and mirrors and everything like that, sit in your closet with all of your soft furnishings and your clothes there. It makes such a difference. And speak clearly so that the audio isn't too hard to process afterwards. If you've got a guest or a co-host, don't talk over each other, because obviously conversations do, but it's hard to edit that out afterwards and things like that. But equipment wise, there's a lot of good budget pieces that you can get. Studios have a bigger budget, obviously, so they have a higher quality equipment usually. But yeah, if you know how to use it, I would say would be the biggest thing. If you are going to do it yourself, invest the time. If you're not able to invest the money into top quality equipment, invest your time into learning how to use it to its full potential.
Because when you're having a conversation, which is what natural podcasting is all about, you just want to dive in and but you got to go, all right, wait for a little moment and then speak. If you want to cough, to the side. I'm still putting the episodes together. I do it and edit it through a program called Audition, but I can know straight away if I'm like, fuck, I've already set myself up here, because all the sounds that I've heard throughout the episode come back to bite me when I'm editing. Yeah.
Do you want it to be a smooth sort of conversational podcast, or a polished, trust-building sort of a podcast of trying to be a leader in the field that they're speaking to? Do you want your ums removed and your ahs and your long pauses shortened so that you do sound like you know what you're talking about? Because people will trust that if you can speak fluently about what you're talking about, they will trust you. So I look for that quite a bit.
I've been in tears at that computer.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it sound the way I want it to sound? Why? I also do a video with mine, which we can touch on in a bit as well, and trying to line those videos and the sound up perfectly so that there is not even a skerrick of difference. Yeah, I've been in tears at that computer.
Yeah, I have had moments myself. The program's great, but I am getting now a source file from Scott. He's given me a great starting point with the audio. I'm just now going through and cleaning up extra little things that I had about my ums and ahs in the middle, like you mentioned, and then trying to find the tension in the story, and then I just pull them out as audio bites, and they can be my potential starters. I really love listening to it the first time because normally I forget all the bits in between, but I get the gist, and then hear it for the first time. I'm like, fuck, I really liked that episode. I got something out of that.
Yeah.
So if I get that feeling, I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Video podcasting, I was dead set against it. Like, I did not want to film my face. I did not want that element added to my podcast, and Matrix insisted that was a really good idea for me. And I think I looked at the stats the other day, and it was something like 93% of all my listeners watch the video. So I think, if you're doing your own, it's worthwhile. But we had this discussion as well. You don't record yours.
We did want to make it a safe space and let people open up. And we've got a couch now, and it's for that reason. They can have it. We've had tissue boxes next to them, and for us too.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we need to film that just yet.
Reach is that real top of funnel play, getting as many people listening to your brand message as possible. So that's a real advantage of having a network. But having said that, absolutely you do not need to have a network. It's just a great sales tool ultimately. And then the other good thing about it is being able to co-promote. So if you've got one podcast, it's very easy to get all your listeners to then listen to your next podcast. And within the network, believe it or not, they're not all different hosts. So one host can have a few different podcasts on different topics within the network as well. So it's quite a cost-effective model as well.
So, Gags, marketing, advertising a brand, that's your bread and butter.
Yes.
Do you use strategies from your day-to-day work to promote your podcast?
I should say yes. But no, to a certain degree I do. I've learnt that, storytelling can be done in many different ways, but being engaging is very important, and how you're going to get that across, in a half an hour. Normally I work with 30 seconds. So it was great. I'm like, great, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but really when, going into content, which I do a lot of as well, you have to lead your guests to the answers. Sometimes they're not always there. And that's something that, from a strategic point of view, I've learnt in my career. And it's definitely helped with episodes. You probably had the same experience as a writer, and knowing that's not going to work, let's just try that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really have a think about what you want to be putting out there, because you can upset people in ways you didn't even know. That's been a real ride for me. Fortunately, it did actually result in people turning into listeners. So nowhere near 1 million people, of course, but a lot of those angry people did go on to listen to the podcast, and that's an hour-long episode that they sat through. So that was, it's got its upsides, but I would say don't strive for virality, because that was a rough couple of weeks.
Okay, so we're talking downloads, we're talking impressions. Have you guys all heard of these sorts of things? Yeah?
Reach and engagement.
Reach and engagement. So look, I guess when a brand comes to you, they know what their objective is. Is it top of funnel, brand awareness? We do have a lot of brands coming to us for brand awareness and reach, right? So to get a whole bunch of people hearing about their brand. And that's really the space we've been playing in for the last 10 years. And in that space, it's all about impressions. So I'll give you a little lesson, unless you're going to cover this later.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
So there's a download. So a download is when someone downloads, they download an episode of your podcast, whereas impressions is how we track how many people hear the ad. And that ad is inserted in the podcast. So there's many ways to insert an ad into a podcast. We can maybe talk about that later.
I think I would like to get your perspective on those.
Yeah, so an impression counts the number of times someone has heard your ad. That might be one person that hears it 3 times as well. So we basically will sell based on impressions. Downloads are more of a vanity metric to say how many people have downloaded an episode. So
I've got some of those vanity metrics if you would like them, and I love looking at them.
Yes. So look, that is reach, impressions. And then, but now more recently, we have had a lot of brands coming to us saying, hey, we want more middle of funnel, like consideration. We want them to consider buying a Subaru. And we want to sort of be able to prove that. So that's where I guess engagement is really important, and they're looking. Podcast is in this weird space at the moment where we can't quite measure the impact of an ad, and everyone wants to measure, right? So I feel quite controversial even talking about this, because a whole bunch of media organisations say you can perfectly measure. You can put, trackers on your ads, and you can work out who's purchased something based on that ad. We're not quite at that stage, because the only guys, as far as I know, and this could be changing right now, things move quick, but Spotify is the platform at the moment where you can actually measure from path to purchase, and it's not quite there yet. So I think talking to brands about that reach and impressions is the best place to start. There's a few different ways. I guess the two main ways, and what, if you wanted to start advertising, for example, the first is like having a 30-second ad, right? So that can just be placed in your podcast. We tend to do it sort of top, middle and tail, which means start, middle, end. And it can be placed in like that, and you can cost that up based on impressions. Like I was saying, impressions, I don't want to confuse you, but it's called a CPM. So it's a cost per 1,000 impressions. We can talk more about that later if you're interested, or just jump on to ChatGPT. They'll tell you as well. Another way is if you felt like maybe your listenership wasn't quite there yet, you don't have enough people, so you're only charging $10 to buy a whole bunch of impressions, you could look for sponsors, and that's where you basically could just sell it as a package, rather than talking about audience, sort of an environment sell. These are the type of people I reach. This is kind of stuff I talk about, and it would suit your brand because of whatever reason, and it's a brand safe environment, or maybe not, and maybe that's what they want, such as alcohol. So there are two ways, and then a third way, I guess a sticky way to get advertisers is you create a really relevant environment for them. It's called like a contextual sell, and if you're talking around a really super relevant topic to them, and they contextually fit into it beautifully. So, for example, we've got a podcast called This Glorious Mess, and it's targeted at parents with young children. And in this example, we had What If by a contextual buy. And in that example, we were in a 3-part series. We were talking about travelling with young kids, and the ins and outs, and the hard parts and the easy parts, and the advice and all that sort of stuff. And it was just a beautiful tie-in with a travel company. We don't always talk about travel on that pod, but it was a good contextual sell.
Yeah, for that episode.
Half an hour to an hour, I would probably cap it at an hour. Especially in Adelaide, everything's half an hour away. So you get in the car, you can listen to an episode on the way there, and then you can listen to an episode on the way back. So if you're looking local, I would cap it around that point. But globally, people have got different travel times. Some people like to binge it while they're cleaning their house, doing whatever. But for me personally, half an hour is probably all I've got in me to listen to something.
With storytelling, so much is said by what you don't say and what you don't include. And we talked about editing your podcasts before. I wanted to ask, how do you decide when someone's telling you a really personal story, how do you decide what to keep and what to leave out?
We keep all of it, to be honest. We don't. One of the rules that we decided on, Pete and I, was let's not cut any stories. We've once or twice cut because it got a bit heavy for someone, or they had to backtrack because they just mentioned something they couldn't say. So we make sure that they're in an area of opening up, and really we want to hear all the bits, all the juice, and so really it's up to them how much they want to expose their story. It's an open space, a safe space. We tell them that beforehand. We have poked a few times because we know it's there under the layer of where they're trying to get at. and they normally, are open to being, telling the story a bit deeper.
What are your favourite podcasts? Maybe all of you.
I've got tiny children, so I don't listen to them often, but I do like the Eat With pod. I like to listen to that one. That gets me through some adult chitty chat.
At first, it used to be Guy Raz, How I Built This. Not sure if you heard that. It's from America. Talks to owners and business owners and how they, had an idea this small and it grew to this. And recently, it's the Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. I think he's doing really good stuff. His content's great and a great host. So that's my most recent. Yeah.
You're going to think I'm selling you, but it's No Filter from Mamma Mia. That was the first podcast, apart from the old true crime days. That was the first podcast I started listening to. It's hosted by Mia Friedman, and she interviews people of. There's no theme. It's just like, no filter, you have to be honest, basically, and cough up the goods. I love that. Then The Imperfects would be my other favourite podcast, just because it's just so interesting. I don't need to explain them. But I can't wait to listen to your podcasts. I've listened to a little bit of yours, and I work from home, so I don't travel enough in the car. As soon as I started with Mamma Mia, I started listening to less podcasts. Oh, so annoying. But yeah, I think people do listen when they're cleaning or going for a walk.
How have you gone about structuring a podcast? Is it something that you kind of always stick to or let it flow? Like, I've got an idea for a podcast, but I just don't know how to start it, I guess.
Start it.
I was in the same situation. We spoke about it for 2 years. And then we literally were like, we have to do this. Let's just give it a crack. The first episode, you can hear in our voice that we're like, fuck, we're actually talking about this. I think Pete at the beginning goes, we're doing this. I'm like, it was the first sentence. So, and it wasn't till, you get a few runs on the board and then you're experiencing a different level of, storytelling or whatever your structure is or your formula. You'll find it. You definitely will. We didn't have it straight away, and it took us a few episodes.
I will say a couple of things with format of the podcast. I try, obviously, the whole middle conversations with a different person every time, so that varies, but I try and have some consistent things. So at the start, I ask why we're in the restaurant, what restaurant we're in, and why we're here, because that's different for every episode, but it can keep it consistent. And then I ask the same 5 questions, like rapid-fire questions at the end of the episode, so that there's some consistency of the episode, no matter where we end up going with the content.
Who is making money out of podcasts in Australia, and what kind of money are they making?
Mamma Mia is making money. Oh, God, really? Look, let's just say it's in the millions, and that allows them to continue to grow. They're still privately run. It's one of the few privately run media organisations in Australia, which is pretty cool.
We have clients who want to advertise on a pod, and then they're like, cool, we've got a radio ad, we'll just chuck it on there. But we know that it's more of an authentic personal space, and so, more of a relaxed ad is better. But what we've never done is any split testing. Have you done any that we can kind of give our clients some stats and be like, no, you can't just use your retail ad on a pod?
Mamma Mia play hardball, so we don't accept radio ads or like pre-recorded ads. But we offer the service to record your ad with our talent free of charge. So we'll just Mamma Mia-fy it a little bit. Split testing, that's a great idea, but it just wouldn't happen with our network.
We should encourage it, but I'd just like to be able to tell them no.
Yeah, I think, look, all the data and statistics around integrating your message and making it sound authentic and natural, and taking the recommendation from a friend approach through your podcast host. I don't know if that could be wrong. I can give you some stats if you want.
From a marketing perspective, I feel like podcasting is quite a saturated space at the moment. How do you recommend people wanting to get into podcasting stand out from the crowd?
I would recommend to people, it's a product, so you need to advertise it as such. So have your normal channels of that, your Instagram. I probably wouldn't go as far as a website, but Instagram, maybe a little bit of a TikTok, to have your reels going to really draw people in. Like you were saying, you get your grabs, your short little pieces to funnel them through to the podcast.
It might be the opposite approach, but actually just being genuine in yourself might be the way that you might stand out. Because then if you're trying to be like everyone else, the way they're doing it, well, then you're kind of blending in again. So I think if you've got an idea, just do it and just make sure it's authentic to your brand, your personal brand, or how you want it to progress. And that might be the way that stands out.
Upset some people. That's how I'm doing it. It wasn't intentional, but here we are. I hark back to authenticity. And don't just cookie cutter something else that you've heard and that you like. Just because you like something else doesn't mean that you can replicate that and have it work for you. So try and find something unique. You can still be talking about the same things that other people are talking about, but your unique perspective is going to make you stand out from other people. And it's probably going to be a slog. It's going to take time because you can't just hope these things happen overnight if you don't have a huge advertising budget or a massive network. But you know, if you're authentic to yourself, I firmly believe it will come.
It is a slog. It is, really. If you,
it is.
That core idea that you've got in mind and you want to bring it to life and, you know, expose it to the world, no matter what it is daunting, but it can be so rewarding.
Yeah, I was going to say,
yeah.
I don't want to make it sound negative. It's a slog, but I absolutely love it.
Yep.
Like, I walk away from every episode.
Yeah.
I mean, when I've done the edit and I've listened to it 4,000 times, I hate my voice. But I love it. And I listen back to the episodes and I'm excited by what I did. So it is worth it. I'm not trying to pin it in that way.
And I guess the slog as well, it's, I guess with any industry, it takes time. And music industry, there's a 10-year overnight success. Like Taylor Swift wasn't Taylor Swift overnight.
Yeah.
So don't expect the overnight pop.
Video is really what people want now. Like, video is the most important thing in media world at the moment, with all different types of advertising. So that is going to be a huge focus of ours. So if you are thinking about starting a pod, I feel like that's a really quick wins there. And as you said, having an ecosystem around your podcast, we do that with all of our pods. So drive out that message, send out the invitations in every way that you can, be it socials. You know, start a good old-fashioned blog. Like at Mamamia, we use written, but you know, that long-form written content will definitely help. Any free ways that you can, right?
I always say, like, across my whole career, your face is your brand, regardless of who you work for, what you're doing. You're putting yourself out there, you're putting your voice out there, so put your face out there and just own it, and yeah.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a mix. So the people that, because I'm a food fanatic, the people that I think are stars that I was expecting to draw in listeners didn't quite do that in the way. But what I did find is those people, when I went to reach out to other people to speak to, I could say, so-and-so's on it, or I've just recorded so-and-so, and that made the guests want to come on it more. But as far as listeners, I didn't get the listenership I expected from those people. They came from more people who pushed it on their own social media channels. It didn't seem to matter what their following was, just if the guest were really excited and pushed it on their social channels, then that added to listenership.
I would agree with that. We've had some big players through the studio, but they haven't pushed it through their channels, and our clients were like, I was expecting that episode to do so much better than what it did, but it's because their guest didn't share it to their channels that it didn't do as well as what they thought it would.
Anybody else? I think we've taken up a lot of your time this evening, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure I'd like to thank all of you guys very much for taking the time this evening. That was really insightful, even for me. You know, I'm trying to learn as quickly as possible, so that was a really wonderful chat. We are going to mingle for a little longer, so feel free if you've got questions that you didn't want to ask on a microphone to come over and have a chat. But thank you all so much for coming along this evening. We really appreciate it. And keep your emails open for the next She Creates event. We will be doing plenty more this year, so thank you all for coming.
just want to say a final thank you to Hannah, our wonderful MC. You were fantastic. Great job.
You were.
And also, just a quick plug for our Facebook community group. If you haven't joined already, jump on, because a lot of people ask us at these events, how do we sort of connect outside of in person? So we're trying to really build up our community there. So yeah, jump on board, give us a follow. And yeah.
Also, we're releasing our tickets there. We're going to release our tickets to the next events there before they go out to the public, and they do sell out. So yeah, if you join the Facebook group, you get your tickets first.
Thanks everyone, enjoy.